okay, can stop it and then gone. But then I thought let it go, in one go without any cut.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to Judicata, the NLIU Law Podcast. I am Anamika, and I'm your host for the second episode. Who we have with us here today is a distinguished luminary whose experience cuts across fields. His time in policing, public administration, and legal scholarship reflects a unique convergence of all three. He is a retired IPS officer of the 1988 batch. During his time as a public officer, Sir has served key roles such as the Commissioner of Police, the Director General of Police in key departments, and also as the Chairman of the Odisha Public Service Commission. Following this, Sir has also authored over 6 books reflecting his outlooks on policing and criminal justice. After his illustrious career of over 33 years as a public officer, Sir now serves as an Adjunct Professor of Law in the National Law University, Odisha, and also as an Honorary Faculty of Law in the Sri Sri University. We are extremely honored to have with us Dr. Satyajit Mohanty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. To start off, if you could walk us through some of the key defining moments since your career spans both law and public administration, what do you think were the key moments that actually shaped this trajectory ever since your very early days in the 1988 IPS batch?
I would rather, give it, analyze in 2 phases. Maybe post 88 when I joined Indian Police Service and rather these two would be little, relevant for this question. If I go before I joined the police service, it was probably my dream to join the civil services. And that dream I started seeing from my later school days maybe. And it took me about 10 years to realize that dream. And I say all the youngsters that if you see a dream, cherish it, keep it close to your heart, and you are going to realize that dream. So it took me a lot of time, lot of trials and tribulations, lot of efforts to come, to realize that dream sometime in 1980s, 88, if you say that. Now, having come to the service, the challenges were different. This is a very demanding service, police service, and there is no fixed working hour. Law and order, public order, basically you maintain order in the society. It's a 24/7 kind of a job. So lot of stress also is there, and it's very demanding, what I say. So then how do I kind of navigated all those stress and all those things? So, and also into the academics, this thing. So this was, I was feeling that it's a profession akin to law, like medicine. So when you enter into any large chamber, you will find these kind of books all along the wall. He keeps updating his knowledge to keep relevant to the profession. Similarly, in doctors, they are also extremely busy. Doctors have some kind of, they call it continuous medical knowledge, CMG or CME education, CME. They call it continuous medical education. Then doctors, every 3-4 months, 2 months, they will be meeting, talking about the latest, what is happening in the field, so that they keep themselves updated. Police, you will not find, any police scholar, unfortunately. Whatever they are taught in the academy, they think that will take them through next 3 decades. So that is actually why most of the police officers, we find that we do not update our knowledge, whatever the knowledge we came from the academy. We do not know what is the latest in the law, what the Supreme Court wants. So not because I blame them, they do not have time also. As a result of that, as a profession, it could not grow. What is the expectation? Probably it could not meet the expectation of the public, I would say that. So when that was a realization after joining the service, I keep myself reinvented, updated. I did all my, educational, I would say, pursuit. After my service, I did my law. I did my master's in human rights. I did my MBA from IIM Bangalore. I did my PhD also National Law University. So this was a parallel kind of effort on my. I was giving an extra efforts for all these things, but I also wanted that I should keep myself updated what's happening, so that as a police officer, I would be kind of discharging my duties, public duties, better, and also adhering to the rule of law and what is expected of me from the society. So this probably motivated me to with my parallel academic activities as well as a professional.
Yes, sir. And drawing on this perspective that you gave us about it once being a dream and then you turning into reality, and also drawing on the versatility since you went from science to law to human rights and actually implementing it, what do you think was the most key educational pillar that actually shaped your career as an officer? Once you were actually into the field, what are some of the moments that you would reflect back on your student life that you feel were very monumental in making you the person and the officer that you once were?
So when I said my dream was to join the civil services, when I say civil services, probably I never wanted that I'll join Indian Police Service. In fact, I started my job as a central civil service in the Indian Railways traffic service 2 years before that, 1986. Then my 1988, I joined in the Indian Police Service. So, uh, if you ask me, when I joined the police, I found a different world altogether. I would say again, as a public servant also, because of the tremendous amount of power and authority the Indian police exercises. There was a realization at one point of time that this power and authority is not basically for me to kind of to have some kind of a upper hand with the public or society. This is basically given to me to serve the people. So the more the power, the more responsibility, rather, I would say. And that means you have to be more responsible to exercise those powers so that there is no abuse of power. Second thing which I realized that the police all over, all across the globe, the amount of discretion they exercise, they are second to none. This has been empirically proved, and I also proved in the Indian context. In my PhD, this was my subject, police discretion. So discretion is core to policing, and every public authority uses discretion. For example, judiciary discretion. I'll give you one example to appreciate. Judicial discretion, it's a judiciary. A lot of discretion is ingrained in the law legislations for it to be exercised. For example, the punishment is up to 3 years. The law has never mentioned that punishment has to be 3 years or shall be up to. That means having regard to the circumstances, background of the criminal, the whole, the accused, the victim, the judge takes a call. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be also 3 years. So that means there's a lot of discretion here, a lot of latitude. What is the sentence you are going to do, and why it is there? Why it is not shall 3 years? This is because to give justice actually. Had it been too rigid, that means discretion without there cannot be discretion without there cannot be justice without discretion. So this is what. So that's why. But again, this discretion has to be exercised for the public interest. It has to be fair, it has to be just, and subserving the public interest. But the flip side is, where there is a discretion, there is also a potential for its abuse. And when there is a potential for abuse, there will be miscarriage of justice. I gave you one example of judiciary, but police, lot of discretion, far more than the judiciary. And since more discretion, more likely to be abused. Why Indian police has lost the trust of the public? This is because the enormous power it enjoys, the enormous discretion it exercises, and there is a concomitant potential for its abuse, which happens also in the field. So I'll tell all the budding litigants will be joining criminal law and all these things. So this gap, they should know why this gap, so that they better appreciate. They do not get disillusioned by joining, all of a sudden seeing all what is happening. So these are, basically this is something. This is why there is a gap between legislative intent and field law enforcement. And this gap is because of this how the police or the public authority is exercising that discretion. So these are some of the realization in course of my journey in the service. Maybe more power, more responsibility, more discretion, better way how to exercise it for the public interest and all those things. Why not public trust? How it has to be regained? That means I also embarked upon certain experiments like community policing. I would also maybe explain that if the time permits. So these are some of the areas which I there was a realization, and accordingly, as far as practicable as a police officer, not only I practiced, I also ensured that my officers, my subordinates, whom I lead, who see me as a as a leader, they also practice similar kind of practices. But there is a huge difference. I mean, how they practice, and so that means there should be a constant supervision. One. Second is accountability. That lacks even today in the police organization. So as a result of which, this is very incumbent specific. You would like to have a rule of law, basic policing, community policing, respecting the public. All these things have in the field. This becomes incumbent specific. Why? That is another area to be seen. Why this happens so? So why it cannot be uniformly practiced by the police officer, irrespective of the incumbent? Incumbent means the police chief I'm talking about. So when the chief changes, another person sits here, things change also. So that is one area which also intrigued me. Then I did in fact, my public policy MBA, I did and studied in IIM Bangalore because of that. Why certain practices are kind of not followed by the successor? Could there be a permanency in the policy making, etc.? So, or any practice, good practice. Why there is in any public service, there is they call it predecessor successor syndrome. Our policy should be free from that. Why should the people suffer from that? If it's a good policy, everybody should benefit from that. It should not be incumbent specific. So then there was after going through this course in IIM Bangalore, I had this policy of community policing for the state, which was implemented in 2014 as a public policy of the state. But again, I found after 4, 5, 6 years, when there was a lack of focus, supervision, it withered away. So that is what is to be seen.
Yes. And in this context of the discretion that police exercises, it would be, I think, very instrumental to discuss that are there any gaps that you felt, considering the armor police reforms that you brought in? What were the gaps that they bridged and the ones that their predecessors had actually failed? We could discuss both the intent of bringing these reforms in and also once they were brought into the implementation stage, how did they play out?
I will not be probably discussing about the reforms. If you there are two levels of reforms. We say some reforms are at the level of the policy making. For example, you might have heard about the police reforms driven by the Supreme Court in Prakash Singh versus Union of India case, 2006, about 20 years now. Supreme Court also followed it up for about 10 years, up to 2016. That reforms probably will not be discussing, because that is some kind of a state initiative, policy change and all those things, in which police leaders at the ground level have no role to play. I would be rather focusing on the reforms which a police chief can do without intervention from the state, without a policy change. What are they, if you ask me? One of my initiative was, I was telling you, this community policing. There is some misconception about community policing. Some people say community policing is policing by the community, so that you enlist the support of the community in overall policing. No, that's a wrong concept actually. Community policing is basically to forge a partnership with the community, and in the process you prioritize the policing to the need of the public, and ultimately the people become co-producers of the public safety. This is what community policing. There is something known as a community oriented policing. That means some of the policing which are for the benefit of the people. But ultimately, if you have some orientation towards the people friendly policing, citizen centric policing, community oriented policing, or for that matter, community policing, ultimately it will be a people's police. I mean, ultimately the people will benefit. For example, one very small initiative which attracted the attention of the people, they liked it, is Know Your Police scheme. One particular day in a month, I go to a school and it's predetermined. We also talk to the principal that we would like to have about 100 students gathered in your. We call them to a police station, about 100 students, not the school. We call them to a police station on a particular day. The teachers also, they're accompanied by the teachers, but all my officers are there. And as the head of the police also, I'll be there. So we allow them to interact with the police officers, go around the police station, see the things for themselves, ask any unpleasant question. I allow them also to know about these things. So it's about 1 hour it goes on, some kind of interaction. It's absolutely interactive. And a lot of misconception, like, because the perception is very important about police. Today, the young generation is having perception from the media, from the social media, from the serials they see, from the movies they watch, instead of interacting directly with a police officer. Idea here was they should come to a police station, interact with the police officers, and know for themselves what is their police. And they ask very strange questions. One of the questions I was asked, "Sir, where is the torture chamber?" One student asked me. I said, um, what do you mean? No, sir, we have seen in the movie there is a chamber in which people are tortured to confess their guilt, etc. I said, you go and see for yourself. He said, I couldn't see it. That's why I'm asking you. I said, so that's in the movie. There is no such. But yes, police also tortures people for extorting confession, which is illegal. But there is no such chamber. But chamber or no chamber, this happens. This is a reality also. But there is no such formal chamber like this. How to stop it? You are questioning it. I'm very happy. So we also kind of make them aware about their rights and what illegality is going on, what is the gap, so that they are more informed citizens, not being informed by this perception from the media, from the movie, from the serials, from the social media. That was one of my attempts. Then also, I'll have grievance every Monday. Anybody can come and public grievance. I go to the field and hold it. There'll be some issues like senior citizens. Then we have specific about students, college students. So community specific also, like traders and all. What is their problem? How do we can help them, etc. So So ultimately, they become co-producers of the public safety. They feel secure. There is a the trust deficit goes also. So this is how I have made some small efforts in my career.
And so, drawing on this police public partnership aspect, how do you think from the days that you started out in 1988 to the present times in 2026, how do you think have the expectations from a police officer changed in the eyes of people, especially considering how they saw it back then in 1988 and how the present generation sees it, and if it has in a drastic way impacted it for good or for bad?
That's a very good question. In the sense, I do not know how far I can answer objectively, because normally everybody has a tendency to say that my time was a good time, today's time is a bad time. But I would not say that. I would not judge them from that perspective. But I would what I have seen as a police officer, the tendency among the police leaders to bridge that gap uh, is uh, is reducing, is on the decline. If I give an example, just for better understanding. For example, when my generation officers, I would say, not all, but many of us were keen that we should bridge that gap. We should be more citizen centric. We should have People should have access to me. Basic thing, because the moment access, that also increases a sense of security in the mind. Sense of security is basically very psychological kind of a thing. So if the chief is accepts, if the police officers are accessible, half of the problem is sorted out. People feel I have a sense of security. I can talk to the officer in charge of the area. I know him. I know the SP. I know the DCP. I know the commissioner. That gives a sense of security. So that means the more accessible you are, the more sense of this thing. But unfortunately, if I answer this, probably the new generation, they think probably accessibility creates problem. Yes, that's true. If you are accessible, more number of problems would come to you. You should be prepared to give that time to the people, and also time to sort out those issues. So that means if you are accessible, you are in fact doing a more difficult job. But in the process, you are enhancing the sense of security. That perception is also increasing. What I find among the younger officers, they feel that access is problematic. People can take advantage of this proximity, and then it's better to keep yourself away. But that is not serving anybody's problem. Nothing it is. Neither the basic objective of policing is not served. Neither you have this trust deficit remains there also, and the purpose, public service, and all these things is also defeated. So this is one thing I find. I tell them also that no, accessibility is not exploited in form of proximity and all these things. This is again a misnomer. You think that way, you be accessible, see that. And if somebody is taking advantage, you have all power on the planet, that you can deny that kind of advantage, and also you can take a stand so that nobody else dares to do that thing. You can be accessible, yet you are not susceptible to be exploited. This also can happen. This I have experienced. So this is one thing I could say, that probably their accessibility has they need to have more accessibility to the public, and think that we are here for the service of the people.
So you mentioned about accessibility and a sense of security, but I'm sure that in certain high pressure law and order situations, all police officers, even the highest of commissioners, face a moral dilemma between choosing between legal propriety and disciplinary action, and also maintaining the sense of accessibility and security for the public. So if we could discuss it on a more personal note as to how you navigated this moral dilemma when you faced it, and how should the present police officers learn from it and actually implement it in their function.
If I could reflect back, then there is always a moral dilemma with every police officer. Every police officer. This moral dilemma, sometimes known as dirty Harry dilemma in police science, Sometimes this is also termed by Western, police scholars as uh, they call it noble cause corruption. Noble cause corruption. Why I'm saying so? This dilemma is always there. So there is a tendency to go for the shortcut to overcome this dilemma. For example, there is a feeling among the police officers. It's not India. It's universal. This we have also proved in Indian context empirically. But what is this phenomenon? What is this thing? When I say this noble cause corruption or dirty hairy dilemma, just explain one. I'll give one example, small example. Police officers have a tendency to feel, believe, perceive that the criminal justice system is weak enough to bring the perpetrator to justice. Many dreaded criminals are also going scot-free or getting acquitted. So there is a tendency that if I take care of, if I go for the vigilante justice, if I somehow knock him down by some encounter or something like that, so the society is rid of one dreaded criminal. And I am not doing anything illegal, he feels, because he thinks he's doing it for the larger societal interest. This is actually known as no this uh, this corruption, what I call it, this noble cause corruption. And this has been theorized as Dirty Harry dilemma, because Dirty Harry is a West movie, Hollywood movie. That is a police sergeant. He's pursuing a kidnapper and who has killed somebody for ransom, and he has assaulted him. Now Dirty is being public is giving a lot of compliments that he has done a great job, but he faces trial for assaulting this accused. Then he says, why the court, that why, when the public is appreciating me for this, why the court is bringing me to justice? Indian context, Hyderabad, 3-4 years back, a girl who was studying in the veterinary science, something like that, she was raped and murdered by some lorry driver, whatever. This was very sensational. This actually kind of, uh, very sensational, and people were paying for the blood of those accused persons. Okay, now 4 accused persons were arrested within 24 hours, and 4 accused persons were also bumped up in next 24 hours, while police went in for some kind of a crime scene recreation in presence of this accused. This is also a standard norm in heinous offences. They go for a crime scene recreation with the accused. And the police, how police explained that these 4 accused persons, they tried to escape, snatched a police weapon, that started firing, and then we had to, on self-defense, we killed them. When these 4 dead bodies along with these officers, they are returning as if these are trophies, thousands of people are greeting them. Hyderabad city, and showering rose petals on them. What is the feeling of those 4 officers at that point of time? They feel they bombed off these 4 criminals and rid the society from those rapist and murder accused persons, and did a great job for the society. They served the society. And there is also societal approval. This is the dilemma for many of these things. And now, of course, to cut this story short, those officers are facing murder case trial, because somebody has to make people accountable. We cannot have some kind of a vigilante state and all those things. So coming back to my own experience, so this was what also I suffered as a police officer. This was also my perception. Then I found that this is shortcut methods and all those things. So that means the end and the means are equally important. If the end is to bring justice or to the accused, or give justice to the victim, the means had to be also fair. Here, what happened? Ultimately, somebody got justice, but the means were also absolutely illegal, criminal. This is actually every police officer suffers from this kind of a dilemma, and I realized it to the best of my capability or having regard to the situation. Since I was aware of this, I tried to keep myself out of from this in pressure situation, etc. So when you ask me that in pressure situation there is also some kind of a pressure to achieve by whatever means. So this pressure, whatever means, is affects everybody. But if you are real, if you are aware of this, probably to some extent you can keep you, keep yourself away from these, I would say, illegal means to achieve a legal end.
So, if we can now move on to a trajectory which is more fruitful for a legal audience, what do you think, having moved from public administration to now being a professor of law, what have you observed are one of the most common misconceptions that law students have? That while they are in their student lives, they've never identified, but once they go into practice and they so closely face the dilemma, that is when they understand it.
Initially I also told this gap between the black letter law and what happens in the field. So this gap is a reality actually. This agency problem, gap, or whatever you call it. This is a reality. What we see in the law school, an ideal condition should be like this, something like that. It should be like this, ought to be like this. But what it is on the field, that exposure we do not have, unfortunately, because that's also not the objective of this course or degree or whatever. Though gradually this is being encouraged so that people from different practices, fields also come and interact with you so that you know what is the ground reality. So my only my why this, what would be the advice for this? The advice would be meet people in the field you want to work actually. Meet them, see the ground reality, appreciate this gap. The sooner we appreciate, the better it is, because this is a reality. So otherwise, there is a frustration that this is what I was told in my school, law school, and this is what is the law of the land, and this is what is happening. So this can be this could be shocking also to some of us. So then, what will be the advice? Probably during your internship, uh, take some time or give some time, probably the areas which you are interested to serve or work in your future, so that you know what is the ground reality and why this gap. And the sooner one learns about these gaps, etc., the better it is, in the sense the acceptance will be better. And if you could do something, contribute something to bridge that gap, nothing like that, but identifying that gap, accepting that gap is also the first thing to know. So then this is how probably you would be able to know this thing.
Yes, sir. This very confusion and this gap is also what sometimes leads to misjudgment for students who want to, let's say, pursue criminal litigation. And since they're not aware of the reality, sometimes they have a confusion in selecting or might make a misjudgment. So, apart from, like you said, identifying the gaps is one of the keys. But are there any other factors that one might consider when wanting to pursue criminal litigation as a career option?
The criminal law is one area which is extremely evolving. I mean, every day it evolves. And then one is required to keep himself or herself abreast with what is happening, how the courts are interpreting. Criminal law interpretation is how it works actually in the field, in the courtroom. This book matters, but ultimately how this law has been interpreted by the court matters more than what is there in the law or statute, how the statute has been interpreted. So in addition to that gap, in addition to this, mismatch between, book and what is practiced, one also to be a good criminal lawyer, one has to be also, keep oneself abreast with the latest judgments, how this is being interpreted. So that will make one a better lawyer in course of time, maybe in course of his career.
Yes, sir. And on a more conclusive note, we could discuss two things mainly. First, being that, let's say, once these very students who have decided on entering criminal litigation have entered into practice, in your personal experience, what have you seen are the moral aspects that the present generation sometimes overlooks? And also, if these are a factor that would really play an important role in public policy and that these young generations should really consider looking into.
Yeah, see the Gen Z, or what do you call them? I do not know.
Mhm.
So it will be, I won't be very fair, in probably giving a sweeping remark on this, because I understand the amount of the planet I started, inherited when I was a young person, and today there is a big difference. Okay,
Mm.
so the competition has expanded, and um, there is also, pressure everywhere, the tension and all those things. So in fact, if you ask me, contrary to many of my generation, in fact, I admire the younger generation because of their. I find, every generation, this is a theory of evolution. Every generation
Mm.
has to be more intelligent than the previous one. So I find the Gen Z, they are more intelligent. IQ level at least 10% is more. I could see that in them. So they are very intelligent and all those things. So they can multitask also, which probably my generation could not do. So I have a lot of admiration for this. While saying so, I cannot compare with my time and all this thing. They are probably struggling to have a foothold in this on this planet at this time of this, evolution of our planet, or movement, journey of our planet. So it won't be very fair, but I would say, see, certain basic things have not changed. Somebody was asking me today that about the civil services. So somebody wanted to write the civil service. So how things have changed your time and this time. I said things have changed in the sense you will be competing with more competent students or participants or candidates than my generation. So this is one thing. Education has been more democratized, or knowledge has become more democratized. You need not have to pay for getting information and resources. It's accessible to everyone. So the competition level has increased. A rural hinterland talented boy is also, girl is competing with the men's, with the urban boys and girls. It has increased. But what is constant? There is something constant. Constant is how focused you are on your goal.
Mhm.
That has not changed. How resolute you are on your objective or aim, that has not changed. The problem here is probably that focus is difficult to maintain because you have so many distractions. If you could realize that and still maintain your focus and be resolute, you can achieve anything. There is no moral degradation, I would say.
Mm.
No. Only thing is that we have not been able to have a focus, etc. We are probably equipping ourselves for the modern time. The survival is, this is another tactics for the survival. I won't say this is morally not this thing. This is morally not, this was not moral or immoral or whatever. I mean, this judgment I do not would like to give. But yes, I understand the constant of the present generation. Yet I think there are certain constants. Um, so if you are aware of that, probably you can navigate through these difficult times much better.
Yes, sir. And I think that would be the perfect note to wrap our conversation up for today. Because, like you mentioned, the planet that you inherited was very different from what it is now. But I only feel that this young generation can only improve it and make it better. And on this note, I think any amount of time would be insufficient to concentrate all of the advice that you've gained in your illustrious career of 33 years. But we would wrap it up for the day. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thank you.